This mockup was recently posted in a Squarespace group that I'm a part of, and they were asking how to accomplish this on Squarespace. And my response at the time was, I don't think this would be a good fit for Squarespace because it's hard to do, grid style layouts like this. It can be done, but it just might not be the best fit. Something like Webflow, where you can control all of the containers, would probably be a better fit for it. But I sat with it a little bit more, and it got me thinking, well, how would I accomplish this on Squarespace? How would you do a vertical line like this? So that's what I'm going to be covering today, how to create very minimal but lined content like this. So if you're interested in creating websites like that, then definitely stick around for this tutorial for sure. So the first thing that we can do is just cover how to do all of the horizontal lines, and then we'll get into how to create the vertical lines. So to create a full width horizontal line like this, Squarespace has a brand new feature for sections. When you click edit on the page and edit the section, you can add a divider to the bottom of any section now. So if I toggle on the divider, it's going to toggle on the default like this, and there's a bunch of different options to choose from, but we just want the straight across shape because we're just adding a line across the bottom. And then on the thickness, you can just drag this all the way down to 1, and now we have a 1 pixel dark border. You could change the color if you wanted to. So that's how you can create a full width line at the bottom of each section. So going back to this design, pretty much everywhere you see a full width line, just consider that a new section of content. So this title up here could be its own section and have a line across the bottom. Then we have this second section, which contains all of this content here with a line across the bottom. This would be its own section of content with its line across the bottom, and so on and so forth. So I've gone ahead on this website and just added lines to the bottom of each section. Now, when it comes to adding a line to the top of the footer, you probably don't want to have to go to every single page, on every single page of your site, go to the last section and add a divider to the bottom of, every section that's the last on its page. It makes more sense just to use CSS to add a border to the top of the footer. So I have some CSS to do that. The way that you can target the footer is by targeting its ID of footer sections. So I have hashtag footer sections. I've opened up some curly brackets. And then you can just add a border to the top that's 1 pixel solid and then whatever color you want. I'm choosing black for this design. Now you can see I have a border on top of the footer, and that will persist on every single page. I've also added a border to the bottom of the header, and that's easy to do. If you edit the site and edit the site header, you can go to style and then border and toggle on the border and then change the thickness down to whatever you want, 1 pixel, and then I just select it to only be on the bottom. So that's how you can do all of your horizontal lines that are going to be full width on the page. But we have these other lines here that don't go full width. So in the section, they kind of end short, but it looks like they go across the section. So we'll get to the vertical line, but right now we have these horizontal lines. And the way that you can add those to the site is you can do that with a line block. So if I edit the page and in this section here, this is where I want my horizontal line, I can add a line block and I can stretch out the size a little bit, and I'll just drag it to where I want the vertical line to be. So I want my vertical lines to match up with the edge of this image. So that's what I'm paying attention to here. I want the end of the line block to match up with the start of the image here. And now in terms of how I've kind of organized the content in this section. So the way that I'm able to get these blocks going to the top of the section is because in the section editor, I have toggled off fill screen. So by default, when you add a section, fill screen will be enabled, and that just allows you to have padding on the top and the bottom of the section. But if you want the blocks to be able to go to the top, which they can't otherwise, then just toggle off fill screen, and now those blocks can be full width and full height, which is exactly what we want here. So what I've done is I've just stretched out the blocks to go to the top and then to go to where the line block is. And then I've vertically aligned the content to the center here. So I've done that with each of these blocks. So I know this content is perfectly spaced between the top of the section and my line block here. So that's the setup there. And now we can get into how to add vertical lines to Squarespace. So the way that we can do this is if I add a code block to the page, we're going to write the CSS for the code block. So basically, I want to be able to just like resize the code block however big I want it to be and just have a black line like running through the middle of the code block. So if I go ahead and just get rid of the demo content, we don't want anything inside the code block right now, but we do want it to be the full height of the section. So I'll just go ahead and hit save right now. And if I right click on the code block, so it's invisible, but it should be about right there, I'll right click on the page and click inspect, and that'll bring up my Chrome inspect tools. Now, Squarespace has given a class to code blocks called code-block. So if I want to target this element, I'll just copy that class, and in the custom CSS window, I'll add a period and then paste in that code block class. Now inside here, I'm going to write and before because we're going to add a pseudo element to the page. And this is less syntax. So whenever you see an ampersand inside of something with curly brackets, you can just imagine that this is basically just saying whatever this is here, put it here. So I'm really just adding a pseudo element to the code block. Now when you use pseudo elements in CSS, so that's a before or after pseudo element, you have to include a content property. Next, I'm going to position it absolutely. I'm going to give it a height of 100% because we want it to span the full height of the code block. We want its width to only be 1 pixel, and we want the background color to be black. Okay, so now you can see we have our vertical line there, but we're not done because there's a couple of issues that we're going to run into. So right now, this applies to all code blocks. So if I were to add a new code block to the page, let's say I want to embed, some third-party script or something like that. Obviously, on my new code block, I don't want to have a vertical line going through that code block. And right now you can see, even though it's aligned, my line is all the way on the left. So you can't, it's hard to see. Like you can see that new code block has the vertical line. So that's a problem. One thing we also need to do is center our line. So I'm going to give it a left of 50%. And that's going to look like it kind of centered it in that code block. So if we highlight the code block again in our inspect tools, we can see like the width of the block. So it looks like the line's in the center right now, but actually it's the left of the element that's in the center. So if we give this a width of like 10 pixels, we'll really be able to see how it's not actually in the center. The left of the line is in the center of the block. So we need to move this line over half of its own width, and we can do that using the transform translate property, and we want to translate it only on the x-axis, the horizontal axis, and we're going to move it over negative 50% of its own width. So now that line is perfectly centered inside of that code block area. Good. So that's good. I'm going to turn this back to 1 pixel because we just want a thin line there. Now, a problem that we're running into right now, again, is that it'll add it to every code block, and we don't want that. So the way that we can limit this to just like code blocks that we specifically want it to be added to is just by adding an element to the code block that has a specific class. So we can call this vertical line, and then I will close the div tag. And now what we can do is we can only target code blocks that contain this vertical line element. And the way that we can do that is with a brand new CSS selector that just came out called has. So we'll only target code blocks that have this vertical line selector, and we need to include that period. So now if I were to add a new code block to the page, it would not affect the new code block. Cool. So this block does not have any border. This code block does. So one other issue that we're going to run into is we can expand the height, but we can't shrink it now. And the reason for that is we just have to specify a really small height for the vertical line element in order for the block to be able to shrink. So what I'll do is I'll just come in here and target the vertical line element and give it a height of something small, like 10 pixels will do. And now when I edit the page, you should be able to see that we can shrink the line block, resize this line block however, wide or short that we want it to be. So I'll reorganize this content a little bit, make sure it's centered in the section. And there we go. So now we have our vertical line element that we can start to reuse across the site. Now, if I want to go ahead and do another one here, I can add a code block and I can manually type in my div class equals vertical line. And as soon as we finish that, you'll see it appear in the code block, which is perfect. So now I can drag this over and make it match up with the edge of the frame of the image. There we go. Now we have that vertical line there. But instead of having to manually retype that every time, what you can do is just select the block and then Control-C on a PC or Command-C on a Mac, and then Control-V or Command-V to paste. And then you can just drag that down, and now we have that line block extending. It looks like it extends the height of the two sections, but that's just because we have the fill screen toggled off, and the blocks can be dragged to the full height of the section. And so I've done the same thing already here. I have my code blocks already set up with the vertical line class, and that's just automatically applying everywhere. So it's a really cool effect, and it works really well with Squarespace's new section divider styling. So if you don't see section divider option in your Squarespace account yet, it's going to be coming very soon to everyone, but you should have it by the time you watch this video. So the last thing is the mobile view is going to be a little bit screwy because on mobile it's still a vertical line and we want it to be a horizontal line. So what we can do is inside of the before pseudo element, we can add a media query. So media queries are specific, they limit CSS to certain screen sizes. So we can write at media screen and max width of 767 pixels. So that's the breakpoint at which Squarespace starts to stack its content from mobile. So that's why we're using this very specific breakpoint. And we'll just give it a height of 1 pixel and a width of 100%. And so now you can see our vertical line has turned into a horizontal one. So if I hit save there and then hit edit, I can center align the line and then just kind of shrink it down. And then I can expand it to be full screen there. Give a little bit of breathing room on either side of the content. I'll pull that up. And then I can get rid of the extra rows at the bottom of the section. So same thing here. I'm just going to kind of do this same process everywhere. Center the line block, make it full screen, and shrink it down. So just go through your site and edit mobile view, get it how you want it to look. I'm not going to continue on. Hopefully that's clear, the process of turning your vertical line into a horizontal one on mobile. So we have a nice mobile view now, and if I go to desktop, we also have a really nice desktop view, and we've really accomplished that kind of separated, boxed, elegant, minimal design here, just using built-in blocks from Squarespace and the section divider feature, and then adding in that vertical line CSS, which works really well. So we can optimize it a little bit further to make it easier to work with. So for example, we're using multiple, declarations here that are the same. Anytime you have that, it's always a good idea just to make it easier to update in the future by adding a variable. So here I'm going to call this vert line width, or vert line, how about thickness? Want it to be as descriptive as possible. So now this will control the vertical line thickness, and here for the width, and here for the height. And so we can now update this variable in one place, and it'll change it everywhere, both for the width on mobile, on desktop, and for the height on mobile. So that's kind of nice. That gives us a little bit more control over our vertical lines there. And in terms of the color of the lines, one thing that we could do is have them just inherit whatever the section border color is. So if I right click and click inspect on a section, basically Squarespace keeps a bunch of custom properties on the root of the document. So if I find the root, there we go. So I'm here in the section settings, and if I go to show all properties, we should find one that says like section divider or something like that. Here we go. Section divider stroke color. So what we can do is we can just copy the section divider stroke color variable and then replace our color with that color. So everywhere we have the color, I'm going to replace it with var and open up some parentheses and then paste in that variable. And so now it's going to pull the divider color from the site styles, which is cool. So here's the background color. I'll replace it. Whoops, I need the var as well. And I'll replace the background color with that variable. So now the line color, it hasn't changed because all of the sections have the line being dark anyway. But if we were going to go into the site styles and go to colors, like if we were to go to one of our sections, so here I'll just go to this first section and it's using the lightest one color theme. So I'll click that. And if I click the section divider stroke color, actually let's look at this section here because this has a vertical line. So we're still using the lightest one color theme. If I change the section divider stroke color to a light color, not only is the border gonna change, but the line color will change as well. And actually this border color didn't update because I think in the section settings, I'm overriding the color to be a dark color. So that wasn't a very good example. Let me edit and go to the background. Yeah, okay, so I overrode the kind of like site-wide color with a specific color here. So that wasn't a great example. But just know that if you were to add a new section and add the line, so let me go ahead and do that. I'll add a blank section. I'll change it to lightest one. I'll copy the line block and paste it into the new section. And now on this section, I'm going to add a divider, and I haven't updated the color yet. And if we go to colors, lightest one, we can change the color of both the line and the divider, which is super cool. So really handy feature there. That way we don't have to go into the custom CSS to edit our line color. It'll just inherit whatever the color theme color is for the section divider. All right, well, I hope that video was helpful. Hopefully you learned some new things and now have another tool in your toolbox to create more creative Squarespace websites. If you like this video, then consider subscribing to the channel. If you might have noticed that split navigation where you have the logo in the center and links on either side, I have a video about that on my channel, so you might want to check that one out as well. But if not, hopefully I'll see you in the next one.